It's hard to believe winter's at a close already, just when things were getting good too. And looking at this season, we had some solid offerings keeping things lively. Action, drama, and comedy for the whole emotional gamut. Hell, even the shows I wasn't too keen on were mostly just boring rather than offensively bad. I guess my expectations could just be lower due to how badly fall burned me, but for once, I'll hazard into optimism to say we had a good run, which feels a bit odd to say. So let's take a closer look and I'll give a quick rundown on what I thought. Hell, maybe even slap a few numbers on these things so people can hold it against me at a later date when my otaku nerd cred comes into question. Shows that were good this season were actually pretty damn good, and there were surprisingly a lot of them too. Between a few comedies that managed to land some decisive hits, action that was a bit deeper than typical shonen, and thriller which doesn't get too much play and was a welcome addition. Overall, I felt we had a good spread of genres keeping things lively throughout the week. Koisuru Asteroid was the fluffy sort of slice of life this season that's almost obligatory. It's cute and relaxing with some low stakes drama to fuel the little lesbian subplot that makes the weeb swoon. Not really a ton to say besides that. I initially praised this show for its art direction, and that declined a bit, but not enough to be a huge drawback. Mostly it felt like the details and movements fell by the wayside as production trudged on. But it was far from awful. If you're a fan of the whole cute girls doing cute things genre, this is right up your alley. And almost exclusively for people like that, speaking as a genre veteran. Jibaku Shounen Hanako-kun filled out the quota of cute, funny, and intriguing by being an absolute treat on just about every level. No, seriously, this show is kind of all over the place. It makes it work through masterful connective storytelling, containing some mystery elements of who the titular ghost is, a romance plot between him and Nene, a comedic awareness that endears the audience to each character, and an eye-catching art style made this one stand out amongst a season packed with great offerings. Lurch knocked this one right out of the park, and kind of reminds me they're one of the rarely recognized studios that still manages to pull off shows with strong direction consistently. And this was an example of a show having a bit of everything, and actually succeeding in marrying serious, funny, heartfelt, and cute together. Really can't praise it enough. Eizouken ni wa te Udasana was definitely my favorite show this season. Initially, when I heard the premise of a group of girls setting out to make an anime, I rolled my eyes as it reads like one of the most standard slice of life plots imaginable. However, when getting into the show itself, I couldn't have been more wrong. This is a series that packs a comedic punch while being a love letter to the medium as a whole. So much effort and care was put into the animation, being that the show is, in itself, about animation. Feeling like the staff working on it channeled their own passion into a self-insert vibe that conveys the unbridled excitement for their careers. Not in a wanky sort of way, but legitimately. Every single part of this bleeds with enthusiasm for animation as an art form. And I was digging it. Striking visuals, amazing animation, unique cast, and capturing a childlike wonder I haven't felt in a long time. If you skip this, correct that mistake. Ishuzoku reviewers made me question why I even bother pretending I don't like ecchi comedies. Because every time I look at one and think there's no way in hell I'm gonna enjoy this, I end up with egg on my face. This was a different sort of twist on the fantasy genre, by taking a more adult approach. And by that I mean pornographic. This is literally about as close as you can get to porn on network television. But in between the fat fuel, there's an entertaining cast carving out a new niche with brothel critique. This leads to some juvenile sex jokes and such, but I wasn't bored despite the initial one-note impression. This show takes the idea of monster girls and applies some amusing humor, by showing them from the point of view of people who live in a world where they're a small trip to a whorehouse away. That's kinda funny. Check it out if you're not too self-conscious about who's around you when you're laughing at porn. ReZero is in that gray area between good and okay. As much as I want to love this show, it really has some glaring flaws in its presentation that keep it from being outright amazing. For one, the show really doesn't fill in its setting until over halfway through the season. That sort of leaves me feeling blindsided when it all starts to play a big role towards the end. But isekai or not, it has an interesting story, with a ton of thought put into its world building. The characters are another story as they're pretty damn flat, but I'll take 2 out of the 3 for now. Pretty solid animation that holds up, if you ignore the 3D models, and some well-executed action and character emotion scenes that show White Fox knows what they're doing. I can see why this is one of the most popular isekai series out there, and if you haven't checked it out, I'd recommend doing so if you like bloody and dark undertones. Middle of the Road was actually on the better end of the spectrum this season. These were the shows I'd give a half-hearted recommendation to if people were looking to watch them as opposed to actively telling people to go check them out. So let's get to them. Darwin's Game was there. I mean, it's bloody as hell, has a mess of a plot and pretty awful character designs, but somehow in that clusterfuck I couldn't really bring myself to stop watching. Characters lack a strong motivation besides not dying and getting paid, but at the same time it felt like some nice junk food for anime battles using superpowers and guns. And on that level, I can respect it enough to leave it alone. I'm not offended by this series. If you like action, cool shit, and because anime sort of logic, this is right up your alley for a quick binge. Runway de Waratte was a little weird, mostly because I liked the concept of this series in the first episode, two friends making their way in the fashion industry, but as things went on, I found it less of two friends and more a shonen series about a dude struggling to get a foothold as a designer. And that's not bad by any stretch, I just felt a little lied to. It's certainly unique among shows, being about a hyper-focused interest that most people probably don't know the first damn thing about. Kind of carrying that sports anime vibe of an underdog flipping an entire sport, or in this show's case, an industry on its head through sheer determination. Animation's pretty damn nice though, but what do you expect from the same company that brought you Happy Sugar Life? Either way, if you're into shonen and want something a little different, you might be pleasantly surprised. Magia Record is honestly surprising to me that it's down here. I was really ready to love this show as soon as it was announced, but here we are. So Shaft did great with the animation. It's honestly a more polished version of Madoka, but lacks a bit of the roughness that gave the original some personality in my opinion. But what held this one back for me was the plot. And holy shit, nothing happens in this series. I've heard talk that it's getting another season or core, and supposedly that will help it feel more epic and complete, but I have a question for you, dear viewer. If you had to wait 12 episodes for a show to draw you into its plot, would you feel like those first 12 episodes were a valuable use of your time? For me, that answer's no, and I wasn't really drawn into it. If you like this show, more power to you. I can't in good faith recommend this to anyone who isn't heavily invested in the franchise. If you are, however, I'm sure your enjoyment will be much better than mine. It Invaded managed to grow on me as it went on. This was honestly a who gives a shit sort of show at the start, but its weird low-end sci-fi setting and psychological thriller aspect mixed with a killer of the week thing was sort of enjoyable. Each mini-arc was something different that the show eventually tied into a larger story, which is neat as the narrative offers a bit of a bigger picture while exploring its gimmick and characters. On the downside, it's got a really forgettable art style, weak direction, and tries super hard to be more confusing than it actually is. We get it. They're in the subconscious. Things don't have to necessarily make sense. If you like mystery, psychological stuff, and gore, you'll probably like what this is offering. Not everything can be good or even decent. When looking at seasonal anime, there's bound to be a few duds in the market, and as good as this round was, it isn't an exception. So on to shows I thought were pretty bad for one reason or another and can't really recommend at all. Pet was the second thriller show out, and while It Invaded thought it was more confusing than it actually was, Pet was just regular confusing. Having watched it all the way through, I can't really say I know what it was about as it lacks a real main character or arc. And before you jump in to tell me, but the manga, I don't actually care. I'm talking about the anime. And in terms of adaptation, if the manga is more coherent, this is a failure and didn't sell me on reading it. Trippy visuals and a vague company doing nefarious shit isn't working for me. Kyokou suffered from the exact problem I thought it would, trying to do too many things and failing to succeed at a single one. When a show tries to be tense, mysterious, lighthearted, funny, and include a romance plot, it's hard to balance them all. The fact that it aired in the same season as Hanako-kun didn't help it either, as it shares a lot thematically and genre-wise with that series, though lacking a lot of the stylistic personality as this has very standard anime art. Whenever this show tried to have a fight scene, it gave a big wink to the audience that this wasn't that serious, making me feel stupid for getting any sort of invested. When the show tried to be funny, it joked about legitimately concerning romantic relationship dynamics or dirty jokes, which none of that worked, so nothing really came together in the end and I found myself bored while watching. Overflow was porn. Not in the wink-wink exceedingly borderline way Ishuzoku reviewers was, but actually edited porn. In a 7-minute runtime, 3 might have been dedicated to a love triangle plot that lacks any real stakes, and the other 3 was reserved for a sex scene that was tastefully cut out. Those air quotes are doing some fucking work right there. If I wanted to watch hentai, I'd just watch hentai. Why bother with an edited release? And lastly, Boku no Tonari ni Ankoku Hakaishin ga Imasu was too standard to stand out this season. In any other, I probably would have placed it higher, but there were way more interesting shows I'd rather watch, and the cringy antics didn't really jive with me. It's just one of those filler slice-of-life comedy shows that fades into the background. Overall, animation was pretty solid this season, with nothing having outright offensive shit. Eizouken had this hand-drawn art style that was just amazing, I can't praise it enough. Hanako-kun had this 4-coma style that managed to blend well into its action scenes. Magia is, well, a shaft anime. What do you expect? Each bled style from their pores in both the actual art and the mechanical tweening between frames, showing nice fluid movements. On the lower end of that spectrum, we had stuff like Kyokou and Darwin's Game packing in the most generic looking direction and using some very bare bones animation. I don't know what to tell you, this looks like if you Google what does anime look like, you'd get shit like this. So if you're into this hobby for the actual animation, be careful, or you're gonna trip on some landmines this season. And with that, let's slap some numbers on these and bury them out back with the rest. Re:Zero was a high 7 out of 10 for a few key missteps that hold it back from greatness. Koisuru Asteroid was an 8 out of 10 for being absolutely adorable and giving me my Yuri fix. Darwin's Game was a 5 out of 10 for a mess of a story that's still weirdly engaging. Magia was a 6 out of 10 for stagnation. You know, this just hit me. Is this Magia or Magia Record? God damn it. It Invaded was a 7 out of 10 for somehow managing to pull off an interesting plot. Pet was a 5 out of 10 for being a boring mess. Eizouken ni Wateu Dasuna was an actual 10 out of 10 for its amazing animation. Overflow was a 2 out of 10 for reminding me why people don't watch porn for the story that often. Jibaku Shounen Hanako-kun was a 9 out of 10 for masterfully tying together conflicting themes. Boku no Tonari ni Ankoku Hakaishin ga Imasu was a 5 out of 10 for being pretty damn average. Runway de Waratte was a 7 out of 10 for a neat little twist on the shonen formula. Kyokou was a 4 out of 10 for falling flat on its face. I swear that wasn't a disabled joke. And lastly, Ishuzoku Reviewers was a 7 out of 10 for being so comfortable in its own skin. And with that, winter 2020 is dead in the water. I have to say, even the shows I didn't like still weren't awful, which led to a pretty good season. Let's just hope this trend continues into spring. And what's that on the horizon? Oh, I think we'll do just fine. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon at patreon.com/trashtierwaifu to pick up some extra perks like voting on what I do next. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to my supporters, Tammy Silverwolf and Volcarona for their continued support.